Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, my man.
I'd love to jump right in. You've been in the alcohol-free space for quite some time, and I'd love to know your thoughts on why do you think it's become so popular over the last 3 or 4 years or so?
It's a really good question, having been in it for a best part of a decade. And I've always been sharing a similar message, which was very much there's nothing to give up and everything to gain, very much about the middle lane, because that just wasn't a group. It wasn't, an area that people focused on. I think wind back the clock 10 years ago, people's thinking around alcohol was really black and white. It was you either drunk or you had a problem, so you couldn't drink. There was nothing in between. People would look at me 10 years ago when I said, I'm just not drinking because I want to improve my performance. They'd be like, what? That's not a thing. That doesn't make any sense. Are you mad? So I think what has happened, and hopefully there's a bit of me that feels maybe I've helped with this. We've been able to articulate a different story over the last, 5-10 years, which has changed everything. Really, there's this new group of people, this new wave of people that actually haven't hit rock bottom. They're not physically dependent on alcohol and therefore need to stop. They're just realizing that optimal performance, optimal health doesn't include alcohol. And I think what that's done is created some momentum. We mentioned Rich Roll before I came on. I did a podcast with him 5 or 6 years ago and did another one recently. But I think some of those were quite seminal at the time. I think that really started to wake people up. It was a really new, fresh message no one had ever heard before, which I think started to inspire, and I know it did, many people to step into, the alcohol-free drink space, which then built even more momentum as the research flooding through as well. The research has always been there, but it's starting to get into the public domain that there's no safe limit with alcohol, World Health Organization and whatnot. And I think it's the meeting of all of those things coming together. Our younger generation are drinking a lot less. I think they're less inspired to drink when they've got mobile devices that could record all those stupid things that we did as kids that luckily are not on tape anywhere. But I'm sure that's a big motivator to not get drunk and messy if you're a teenager these days, because everything's recorded and everyone's going to see it. I think it's just that mishmash of all of those beautiful things coming together that's kickstarted this movement that's changing our cultural landscape, which is really exciting.
You mentioned that when people stop drinking, they have much more to gain than they do to lose. And I think people have the opposite mindset. They say, when I quit drinking, I'm not going to have any friends. When I quit drinking, my social life is going to be negative. When I quit drinking, I'm going to be more anxious. I'm going to be more stressed. I'm not going to have any fun. Talk about what people can gain if they quit alcohol.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, we can back this with science, but even subjectively, having witnessed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people make this change, and myself included, it's incredible. It's like gaining a superpower. If you're an average drinker, someone that would drink, in the week, a couple, or the weekend, a couple more, the occasional binge, right? The 70% of the Western population basically fit that bracket. For anyone in that bracket to take a break from alcohol, and I'm always about taking a break, is like gaining a superpower. Or flip the script the other way. It's like carrying kryptonite in your backpack of life in everything you do, from the way that you show up in your career, the way you show up in your relationships. Yes, I'm going to own the fact that, of course, and I've been there, right? Because I drank for years and years and years, and I'm not going to deny the fact that I had some brilliant times whilst under the influence of alcohol. So I'm not going to go back and try and erase that, far from it. But I think what you start to realize is quite quickly, if you do this reflective work, that very often our relationship with alcohol evolves over time. And what was once fun, potentially, or felt like fun in maybe our teens or 20s, is less fun in our 30s, and it's certainly less fun than that in 40s and 50s and beyond. So I think there's an awakening that needs to happen for people to take a break and find out what's waiting for them. And some of the headline research we know from the largest study ever conducted into a 28-day break from alcohol for average drinkers, they lost on average 3 kilograms in weight, reduced their risk of type 2 diabetes, various types of cancer, their dangerous liver fat reduced by up to 40%. And that's just to name a few. But the guy that created that study was so enthused by those results that he said, almost quote unquote, if these results were found in a pill form, everyone would want it and it would be worth billions. And that's just some of the physiological benefits, let alone more time, more energy, more motivation, all of these things coming through. The benefits are almost like off the charts.
I think people often associate something being healthy with it being illegal. And alcohol has obviously been, legal for quite some time. All you have to do here in the States is be 21 and show like a valid ID and you can purchase alcohol. And they just assume that, because I'm being told that this is legal, then there must not be any like adverse risks other than like getting behind the wheel of an automobile. I know obviously everybody knows that when they drink and drive, it's not safe. Could you describe more in depth on like why alcohol might be worse for people and their health than they think? Like why like just casually even drinking and partying might be more detrimental to their life than they think?
Yeah, and this is so broad, but let's just pick on like one element, which basically sets the scene for everything that follows. What we know is in 1988, alcohol was classified as a group 1 carcinogen. So it's a cancer-causing substance. You can't get a higher group than that. Inside that group, you've got tobacco, asbestos, radiation, and alcohol. I mean, if we just begin there. So if you think about it, let's flip this into a little analogy that I like to at times. Let's imagine 100 years ago, they built a gym, an exercise gym. And people would go to that gym. The famous people went to the gym. The pretty people went to that gym, the rich and famous. And a big business grew up around that gym. And they started to build more of those gyms. And our kids went to their gyms. And we were sneaking into those gyms when we were 13. And you weren't really meant to go in there until you were 18 or 21. Billboards like advertised these gyms. Billions of dollars were spent. $1 billion industry grew up. There was tax revenue coming in from this industry. And imagine then, back in 1988, 30 odd years ago, the governments and the industries themselves found out there was asbestos in the roof of those gyms that had been disturbed. And unbeknownst to all the people going to the gym, they were breathing in this asbestos. Yet still the advertising was allowed to proliferate and still the tax revenues were being taken. And then a little bit of research would come out to say there's asbestos in the roof. And then someone else would come out to say, oh no, don't worry about that. It's amazing. This is still brilliant for you and fabulous. And continually we use that substance. And imagine one day someone listened to a podcast like this and you found out that gym you'd been going to for all of those years had asbestos in the roof, and you'd encouraged your kids to go to that gym. You'd given your kids, the keys to that gym. Like, imagine we found that out today. That would be probably the biggest health and wellness scandal like ever in our generation. Now contrast that with alcohol. What's the difference? There is none. It's a group 1 carcinogen. Fact. It has been known for many, many years. And we're in this ridiculous situation where it is everywhere. We get slammed with marketing. The governments take, all the easy tax dollars, and barely anyone's even aware that there's asbestos in the roof. It's nuts.
I'd love to dive into your backstory because obviously what you do now was fundamentally driven by your own story. So talk a bit about like your career as a footballer and then advancing into the financial services industry. I think you were like some sort of a broker or trader, and then how alcohol impacted your life and then what led you to give up drinking.
Yeah. So I started out as a professional soccer player. So I left school at 16 to pursue that dream, reached the pinnacle of what I wanted to achieve, which was to play in the football league and score in the football league and achieve those things, and then got injured. Really in late teens, early 20s, and my career was done. Early 20s, like it is for a lot of footballers. So I felt lost, didn't know where to go, what to do. It'd been my meaning, my purpose. Ended up traveling the world. And really not until my mid 20s, I arrived back in the UK with my now wife and fell into this world of broking. Never meant to be a thing. The guys in the bright jackets that scream and shout at one another. But what I'd found, my previous career as a professional athlete set me up brilliantly for that space. It was fast paced. It was electric. You needed a really thick skin. You needed to be able to bounce back quickly. And fast forward in that space, 10 years, I'd achieved, I guess, that so-called material success by that yardstick. So everything looked amazing, but inwardly was struggling a bit, in truth. I'd put on a lot of weight. I hadn't exercised for the best part of 10 years. I was drinking too much. Was I drinking to a degree that was problematic or dependent? No. I was drinking like everyone else, but everyone else was drinking too much. My relationships were strained. Life had plateaued a little bit. I just felt unfit and unhealthy and unfulfilled, for want of a better word, bored. almost, when in theory I should have been skipping down, central London, high-fiving everyone on the way to work because I'd achieved what I thought was going to bring me happiness, was, a certain number in the bank balance. So I had a big epiphany moment of what is it? What are we all doing? This is nuts. And I looked around at those people more successful than me for motivation, and my only yardstick being, monetary success. And I found more of the same: broken bodies, broken homes, broken minds. I was just like, this is nuts. What are we all doing? Something's fundamentally wrong here. And in that epiphany moment, I quit the big job that I had, and I had a year out gardening leave. I was fortunate enough, they pay you to not work because they don't want you to start a new business. So in that year, I traveled the world. I trained by fluke with a guy called John Grinder. John Grinder is the co-founder of NLP. He's the guy that trained Anthony Robbins. And it blew my mind. So I trained as an executive coach. I didn't want to be a coach. I just wanted to learn from the guy that is John Grinder. That blew my mind some 12 years ago in that space that I had a year out. So I came back to the world of broking. I was going to set up a new business, and I was going to do it differently. We were going to eat salads and stuff, and we were going to exercise and be fit and healthy, unlike many brokers at the time. And of course, step back into that arena, 5 minutes, entertaining clients again. I'm out all the time again. I'm tired again. The weight's going back on. I'm inconsistent again. And then there was another penny drop moment of, oh, I wonder, is it alcohol? And what's funny about that was the last thing I ever questioned. I was trying meditation, I was trying exercise, trying nutrition. The last thing I ever thought to question in my life, and this just goes to show how hard baked it is into so many of our personalities, was alcohol, because that felt like that was just a given, right? I was a broker, and that's how I celebrated and socialized. But I just felt that overwhelming desire to question this thing. Maybe if I removed it, that would be the secret to me gaining momentum again and doing all the things I wanted to do consistently. And of course, in my story, it was, when I finally got the courage, and it took me many failed attempts to get there, and I didn't give up. That was the key. I even went back to university twice to do a degree and then a master's degree in positive psychology and coaching psychology, just to figure out how my brain worked, because I was finding it difficult to stop, even though there was no physical dependence. Psychologically, I'd have my rubber arm twisted, the social pressure. I mean, think about it. Alcohol is the only drug in the world. When you say you don't want to take it, very often you get slaughtered for it. Do you know what I mean? People will be like, what do you mean you're not drinking? Are you nuts? Don't be a lightweight. God, you're so boring. It's, even all of it, when you think about it, is completely nuts when you get a bit of distance from it. So it took me a while to figure out how to retrain myself as a broker, in my social life, to not drink. And it was difficult. And out the other side of that for me was that transformation. I lost 42 pounds in weight. Body fat went from 35% down to 10%, resting heart rate 68 to 42, paused and reversed. Heart disease at one point not disappeared, but actually sent it back into remission. My business, which everyone said would fail because you can't be a broker and not drink, grew 7 times bigger in half the time, because I was always on the ball. Instead of me showing up 50% of the week, I was showing up 100%, performing at 100%, because there was no inconsistency of that hangover and anxiety. And I had anxiety, full-blown panic attacks, gone, never come back. Rosacea on my skin, pimpling nose and cheeks, gone, never come back. Relationships blossom, meaning, purpose, momentum came back into my life. I was like, this is the greatest gift ever. There's got to be millions and millions and millions of people like me out there in the world that were in that middle lane, that they would benefit from taking a break. And that was really the Kickstarter to everything that's followed.
Congrats, man. What a story. And success leaves clues. You mentioned that you failed over and over and over again when you wanted to quit drinking. And a lot of people do that, whether it's with alcohol or any other substance that is ruining their life and they want to give up. If you could go back and do it all over again, what are some of the biggest mistakes you think you made when you first decided to quit drinking, that if you could go back and help mitigate some of the failures, what would you do?
I think it is all about the failures, because I think for so many people, they think if they fail, they are a failure, and they give up. See it all the time, especially around behavioral change. Now I understand how behavioral change works, the great work of James Prochaska, Stages of Change model, actually shows us, and the science shows us, that most people take 4 or 5 times around the behavioral change loop before they make lasting change. So what that actually tells us, slip-ups, stumbles, departures from the wagon, whatever you want to call them, are often a necessary part of change. So they're not a reason to give up or beat yourself up to say, good, you're rubbish, you're useless, because you said you were going to take a break from alcohol and you slipped up after 10 days or 12 days or whatever it might be. It's the same with food, when actually they're often a learning opportunity. I was lucky. I sort of figured that out myself organically, but what I see through so many people is they give up too quickly, when for me, actually, a slip, a stumble often teaches you everything you need to know. It reminds you of all the reasons why you're on, this adventure in the first place. And so people become so scared of failure. If they fail, they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, and they give up. So a lot of the work that I do, whether I'm dealing with elite performers or everyday heroes, is actually to get that out front really quickly. It's like, let's own it. There's a high chance that you are going to slip up at some point. What does that look like? What are your options? What can you learn from it? Let's bounce back, not feel ashamed. Feel a sense of like momentum that now you're going to learn something you didn't know before. So I'd say that would be the biggest thing that I wish I'd known more about. I think that would have sped up my journey somewhat.
Was just not feeling ashamed of failing.
Yeah, because I think too many people do. And when we feel ashamed, we sweep it under the carpet, we give up. And where's the safe place to hide? Doing what everyone else is doing. And in our culture, that's drink, right? So it's like, well, it's safe. If I keep drinking, I never have to embrace the fact that by trying to stop drinking, I might fail. So I'll just keep drinking. I mean, how many people are caught in that negative loop at the moment who would love to stop, but are too embarrassed, ashamed to try in case it doesn't work out, thinking they've got to be perfect, when actually that's not the case at all. You'll learn and iterate and grow and develop through the process.
Right. And I think a big part of having that perspective shift and learning from failure and not seeing it as your identity is to use those lessons to move forward. Would have been like some of the main principles or themes of the people that have either gone through the program you've created, or even people or even in your own journey that have helped them stay alcohol free for a long period of time? Like, what are some of the things that people you believe like kind of have to do in order to have long-term recovery?
Yeah. So again, the place that I'm in is not in addiction. It's not in problematic. It's in the average drinker. So for me, it's building that compelling future. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be with? What do you want to have learned? Where do you want your career to be? What goals do you aspire to? Let's get so excited about this future that's so rich and so compelling. There's no room for alcohol. There is no room for it in an optimized, energized, knocking it out the park kind of performance, kind of life. There just isn't. Like, I cannot tell you how many elite performers I get to work with, the best entrepreneurs in the world, the best athletes in the world. I work with the Professional Footballers Association. Now, is that like nice full story? That was in my backstory. So I train some of the best athletes in their career transition. I'm part of the business school. Literally it's David Beckham's part of that union. This is like the elite of the elite. These guys and girls now, they're not drinking in the way they used to. There's no time for that. They haven't got time to destroy their sleep or wake up the next day hungover. So they're going to underperform the day after that. It just isn't time for it. So the big work that I do is let's just create this compelling future. Let's move towards that. And then along the journey of enjoying that process, realize actually I'm fitter, faster, healthier. I'm getting more stuff done. My mental health's a million times better. My career is booming. My relationships are getting better. I look better. I feel better. Why the hell would I go back to drinking that's going to destroy all that? I'm just not doing it. So in the end, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's how I feel about alcohol. Why the hell would I drink? It makes absolutely no sense to do that thing.
I want to talk about peer pressure, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, especially like the world that you play in, where you maybe, you don't necessarily have a problem. You're not an alcoholic, etc. And then you give it up and you're the only person like around your group of people that isn't drinking. And then you have people that are encouraging you to drink. You have people that are saying, oh, like, I'm not going to do business with you unless we go out for drinks, or whatever the case may be. How did you survive like those early days of being in a business, like you said, that you were told would fail if it didn't involve drinking?
Yeah, it was tough. I'm not going to dress it up. I failed a lot, and my rubber arm was easily twisted in the early days. If a client said, don't be such a lightweight, what are you talking about? Oh, bore off. I'd be like, well, I'll show you boring. And then, of course, I'd have a couple of drinks, which made no sense, so it was hard. And then you'd wake up the next day and reflect on it and go, did I want to drink? No. Did it serve me? No. Now I feel awful. I'm going to underperform today. Why did I do that? Because I felt pressured into it. All right, what's more important in my life, this client or me and my family? And you have to do that reflective work and think, actually, my health, physical and mental, is much more important to my family than me appeasing or pleasing a client at the end of the day. So that builds a bit more courage. And what I actually did in the end was create a challenge. This was part of it, really, because I needed something to go into bat with, in truth. So if I said to clients or colleagues or friends, I'm just taking a break, that was well received, as opposed to, that's it, I'm out, I'm never drinking again, because that was too much for everyone. And obviously friends and colleagues and clients were like, oh, I'll get you back in 30 days or whatever it is. And then we can really go on the source. It'd be a bit like, yeah. But I knew in my own mind, I just needed the space to get it done. So whilst it was hard and there was lots of aborted attempts, let's say, eventually I cracked it. And then it was really quick for me. So I'd say in 28 days, started to lose weight. My anxiety had gone. I felt fitter, faster. I was performing better at work. My relationships started to blossom, all the things that I mentioned. So then that built wonderful motivation, because it was a little bit along the lines of, I don't actually care what you think anymore. I don't care if you think my business is going to fail. I don't care if you don't want to do business with me. This thing is too good. I'm not walking away from it. I'm going to stay with it and see where it takes me. And if it takes me to a place where I can't operate in this industry, then so be it. As it transpired, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in that industry in many ways.
So like in the addiction recovery world, while I know you're not in it, like they would advocate, in many ways to go to like 12-step meetings or to change your community of people so that you're around people that are actually on the same journey as you. Do you recommend people also do the same thing so that they can alleviate some of the temptation that may come from people that they're spending time with?
I think there's definitely an argument for building momentum. So what I mean by that is, if it helps you to get 2 weeks, 3 weeks under your belt because you're not going out as much socially with a certain group of people that are going to put you under that social pressure, I think that's a good idea, because a bit like I described, once you start to really feel the benefits yourself, that in itself becomes really motivational. So if you find yourself out with that group of people on the 4th week, for example, your power is going to be coming back. You're more likely, I think, to stay on that adventure. So I think there's some advantages to that, but equally, life's life, right? You've got to collide with life. You can't hide from it for the rest of your life. You've still got friends and let's look at it like this. Most people's friends and families all drink. My friends and family all still drink. All my clients, or majority of my clients, still drink. Not so much anymore when I was broking. So you've got to collide with life. You can't hide from it. So I think there is an element of throwing yourself right back into the lion's den. And again, it might be a bumpy road, but if you can manage that, then you're bulletproof, right? There's nothing can stop you. You can't get tripped up by, a work colleague suddenly going, I'm leaving, let's all go to the pub. And you're like, oh, I've never been in this scenario before. It's like, I've done this a million times and I'm not going to drink, because why the hell would I drink? It's irrelevant whether it's a leaving do or it's a birthday. I'm not doing that thing because it's going to destroy me. I'm going to feel awful tomorrow. I'm going to have anxiety. I'm going to stop exercising the way I want to do. I'm going to eat food. I'm just not doing it. So I think, yes, you can build momentum. I think one thing, though, that is important, I will say, that is community. Community is wonderful. And I think that's the biggest thing that comes out of 12-step and the recovery community, which I love, by the way, and I have total respect for. My belief around this whole thing is that we're all on the same team. We're just playing in different positions. I'm just a bit further upfield. I'm just trying to inspire people before they need that great work of 12-step and whatnot. But what I noticed through those wonderful organizations is community. And that, again, was part of my inspiration to try and create communities, which I've, been doing for the best part of 10 years, to bring like-minded people together so that actually there is a space where they realize there's people like them going through the same things as them, and to inspire each other, not to woe betides each other, to inspire each other that actually there's people here looking great, feeling great, achieving things they would never normally have achieved. So people aspire to that. So I think community is a big part of it.
You talked about all the amazing benefits that came from quitting for just 28 days. I know you've also run programs that are 90 days, a year long. How do the benefits continue to get exponentially better as the time without alcohol goes on?
Yeah, I think the longer challenges are better, in truth. It's over 10 years at this challenge. There's only meant to be 28 days. I'm still doing it. And why wouldn't I? But I think 90 days is a bit of a sweet spot. And the reason I like 90 days is because 30 days, you can almost just tough it out. It's like, I'm going to cling on to this thing for 30 days and just try and get to the end. We have dry Jan's, a huge thing here in the UK. Well, it's a huge thing globally now. But I think lots of people approach that with the same thing. In the UK, it's the coldest month of the year. It's the darkest month of the year. Everyone's just absolutely obliterated themselves over Christmas. So people are quite happy just to lock themselves away for a month and they go, I did it. I didn't drink for a month. But like my point earlier, they didn't collide with life at all. They just hid from it for a month. There's not really a lot of learning in that. Whereas over 90 days, you're going to have the wedding, the birthday, the stressful day, the work day, the life curveball, the celebration, the commiseration, all those things that you might have hid from for 30 days. You've got to meet them head on. So I think those longer challenges give you a glimpse into your world to deal with those things. And out the other side of them very often is the greatest mojo, the greatest momentum, the greatest motivation and confidence when you do the big challenge or you overcome the big stressful triggering moment that whatever used to trigger you in your life without alcohol and you feel great for it. That builds that sense of momentum, I think, over time. So I do like the longer challenges. And also what's important about that, I think you get a chance to rediscover you. Who are you beneath the facade of those 1 or 2 drinks in the week and 2 or 3 more at the weekend? Like I was dramatically a different person. I thought I was this extrovert holding court and larger than life, and actually realized I was really introvert underneath it all. That was for me a revelation. It was like, I just didn't even know that. I hadn't seen that person. I hadn't been me for the best part of 20 years. So getting comfortable with that through that, initial 90-day period, I think is also really important because then like you're bulletproof. You're showing up as you. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. You're like, this is it. This is all I got. You can take it or leave it.
And you got to take the mask off, right, to find out who you really are. And I think alcohol creates this mask that's very alluring to people because you can go out and be socially fun. You can appear to be more confident. You can be more laid back. It can, people say they have less anxiety, less stress. It helps alleviate pain until it stops working, right? And then all of a sudden you've developed this tolerance to it. Even if you're a middle of the road drinker, you still develop tolerance to alcohol. I mean, it's still an addictive substance, whether or not you're quote unquote alcoholic or not. And with that said, there's people who may be saying like, listen, I get it. I've heard about all the amazing benefits of quitting drinking. Andy, your story is inspiring, but my life isn't bad. Like I am very successful, make a lot of money, have a good relationship with my family. Like, why should I give up alcohol? Like, what's your message to somebody like that?
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I'm not here to tell people what they should or shouldn't do. Far from it. How will you know unless you take a break? There'll be lots of super successful people listening to this that drink on a consistent basis going, hold on, but I've got a great life and I'm healthy and I'm running marathons and I'm creating all these wonderful businesses and initiatives. Of course there is. 70% of the adult population of the Western world drink, right? So most people are going to fit into that bracket. But equally, how do you know you're not leaving 10% on the table, 20% on the table, 30 or 40% on the table? Day after day, decade after decade. Never going to know. You will never know unless you try. So that is always my message. Again, it's like, why not? What have you got to lose by giving it a go? What have you got to lose by taking a break of 30 or 90 days? And equally, let's just do the thought experiment. If I were to say to you, right, everyone listening, let's just take a 90-day break and find out truly, beneath that, is that your optimal 100% self? Let's go and get that 10 or 20 or 30% back. But let's just say we do this mind experiment now. If you were to take a 90-day break from alcohol, how does that make you feel? For those listening, if there's a sense of fear and dread about that, what are you talking about? I couldn't take 90 days. Oh no, I've got a wedding, I've got a commiseration, I've got a celebration, right? That has got to speak volumes to you right there. If there's any, so the only people that, if their heart does not skip a beat and they're like, yeah, whatever, I could do that. Brilliant. If your heart is starting to speed up a little bit, and it's like, yeah, well, but if I could start next week or maybe the week after that, that's got to speak volumes to you right there. That's telling you something powerful. And I think if that's you, you've got so much to gain. Joseph Campbell said this, the great author of The Hero of a Thousand Faces and The Hero's Journey. Cave you most fear to tread holds the treasure you seek. And I think that's the case with so many people with alcohol. It's the one that scares the bejesus out of them. So step into that cave.
Yeah, that is like a hidden sign that you have a problem with drinking, right? Is that if the thought of you giving it up for 28 days or 90 days like, is dreading, or you think you can't do it, then that's a sign that you may have a pretty unhealthy relationship with it, even though your life isn't quote unquote falling apart. Anything else that might get overlooked, do you think, when it comes to people who might want to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, I think outside of the obvious, as I just described, of just giving it a go, I think, well, some people don't suffer hangovers, right? So we know that medically. And I think, again, that is one of these things that trips a lot of people up, because then there isn't that obvious motivation to stop. So we just keep going, right? And we're all so different. Like, I would suffer from drink. It would, like, mentally, physically, I would suffer from it. My wife could drink the same amount and bounce up the next day as if there's nothing wrong with her. So I think there's an element of that as well. Sometimes you don't even realize what it's doing to you because your body is different and the way you metabolize alcohol is different. Therefore, again, it's that same thing. It has to be worth taking a break, because people don't know what they don't know. And again, as I described right at the start of this episode, not only, around the subjective wins of more motivation and time and all of those things, we still have to remember it is a group 1 carcinogen. Most people's relationship with it is way above and beyond anything that's healthy. And there is no healthy limit. The World Health Organization are unequivocal about this. There is zero. There's not a, less risky. It's just a zero, a zero. So I think it's worth reminding yourself that, just from a health standpoint, forget everything else. It's something worth taking a break from periodically, at least.
I know a big part of your story, like mine and also Rich's, is fitness and health, and how that's played a massive part in our transformations. Why do you think health has been so pivotal for you to be able to stay on this path for so long? And what's your advice to the audience to start taking their health seriously so that they can not only enhance their alcohol-free lifestyle if they're choosing to do so, but to improve their overall quality of life in general?
Yeah, I think it's about energy in many ways, having the energy to do the things that add value in your life. I look at, that traditional life trajectory as we move into 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, and we've probably all got people in our life. And yes, they might still be here with us if we're fortunate, but their quality of life is totally diminished. They are limping out of this short and precious life due to obesity, due to diabetes, or whatever it is, right? A whole host of lifestyle type disease and disability. We see it everywhere, right? It's all around us. So for me, my vision of that has always been that, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt that said, you've got 2 options in life, to wear out or rust out. I choose to wear out. And I always really like that. And then that's just been, I think, my approach. And I think it should be everyone's approach. You want to enjoy as much as you can, those 50, 60, 70, 80 and beyond, as opposed to limping through life. And if we look at alcohol, like, it is so vastly impactful on all domains of our life, not just the obvious that I mentioned, but the fact that you lose motivation because you're tired. It destroys our sleep. So you're less likely to exercise consistently and eat well. Now, if you compound that over decade after decade, because think about alcohol, most people don't drink for 1 year, do they? How many people do you know that had a drinking career that lasted a year? No, I've never met anyone like that. We drink for decades, and most people drink and never stop. It's the truth of it. They start in their teens and they never ever stop. So imagine that life, if it's slowly degrading because of our relationship with alcohol and all the knock-on consequences of that, versus the one that takes periodic breaks or that's alcohol free. Like, what does that life look like? Being more optimal, more consistent in the way you nourish your body, more consistent in the way that you eat, better mental health, better performance, maybe more income, better relationships. Like, compound that over the next 20, 30 years. What is the difference between those life? Like, that gap for me is priceless, most people would pay everything they've got to, achieve that gap on the optimal side. So for me, that just keeps me motivated. It's like, again, why would I? It's the thing that gets in the way of all the good stuff in many ways.
So given your background in positive psychology, NLP, behavior change, a lot of people, like you said, like people, they'll start drinking at a certain age and they won't stop in many cases until their last day here on earth. So when people are looking to make a change with something that's consumed their life for so long, their brain is still caught up in these unhealthy habits. What advice do you have for people on how they can get better at unlearning these unhealthy habits and creating new healthy, positive ones?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the coaching, I mentioned a lot of the work that I do is to train coaches, executive coaches, life coaches, but I also train people specifically in alcohol-free performance coaching. And one of the tools that we use, we call it the ambivalent seesaw, which is really to help people break down that ambivalence. Because what you described there is when you first try and make a change, you've got that love-hate relationship going on. It's like, oh, never again. I've had enough. I feel awful. Oh, it's Friday night and the lads are all going out, or, I've had a stressful day at work. Oh, but I want to stop because it makes me feel anxious. So we have this noise inside our head, this ambivalence, effectively, love, hate. So great work you can do really is really reflect upon, the positives that you really, really experience for consuming alcohol. And then really try to unpick them. Are they genuinely still true for you? Because I think there's a big argument to say that, yes, at some point in our life, of course, alcohol's added perceived value, right? And, I've had some brilliant times with friends and socially and all that good stuff, right? I'm not going to deny any of that. But then it wasn't as fun. And actually, on real reflection, it was like, well, actually, those one or two drinks with friends that ends up being 4 or 5 with friends, is that night a really fun night, or was the best bit right at the start and then it's all a bit blurry and a bit fuzzy and a bit hazy? And then the next day, what are the consequences? What are the real consequences, knock-on consequences for you, not for anyone else? And I think if you start to do that evaluation, you start to see a completely different picture of your relationship with alcohol, and you start to see the truth again, which has got lost over the years. And we just end up with these limiting stories and beliefs, and we go, oh, alcohol's fun. Alcohol helps me relax. But does it? Does it really help you relax? Like, think about that. How do you feel the next day? More relaxed or less relaxed? Of course, it tricks your brain because it gives you temporary brain damage and blows up your neurochemistry into a sense of relaxation. I totally own that. But if you stopped after 2 drinks, more relaxed or less relaxed? That's like uncomfortable withdrawal, tiredness. 4 or 5 and you stop drinking. What does that feel like? More relaxed, less relaxed? What about the next day? Like, most of what it appears to give, it takes away more. Same with fun. It appears to create fun, but actually the fun comes in the early stages of the night when most people are compos mentis anyway. Then it gets messy. Then the fun sponge comes out and it mops up all the joy from the day after and the day after that and the day after that. So I think when people just stop and do some honest reflection, often they'll see what they need to see, which is actually, I think I'm going to give this a go. I think I'm going to give this a break because maybe it's not offering what I thought it once did offer me.
What advice do you have for people that are convinced that when they stop drinking, they're not going to have fun anymore? Like, how can their life be more fun when they stop?
Yeah, and this is part of it, right? Let's just unpick that for a minute. Imagine you tell yourself this story. I'm a big believer in the stories that you tell. Tell better stories, lead a better life. Tell great stories, lead a great life. Life is just a set of beliefs, effectively. It's not events that shape our lives, but our beliefs about them. Epictetus taught us that 2,000 years ago, the great Stoic philosopher. So when we say things like, I need to drink to have fun, as a coach, I'm just pulling that to pieces really quickly. It's like, what? So the only way you ever have fun is when you're drinking. Of course, that's just completely untrue. And instantly, has there ever been a time when you were drinking and it wasn't fun? Yeah, all the time. In fact, has there been some of the most unfun moments of your life? come on the back of a few drinks. Of course it has. Like, you just start to tear apart this story that we tell. Oh, I need alcohol to have fun. Firstly, if that were true, every single time you drunk, it would be fun. So that's a fair reflection. And is that true? Evaluate your last 5 times you've been out drinking, plonked in front of the TV, watching like rubbish telly. Is that fun? Or when you had a couple too many and you said something, or you woke up the next day with shame, regret, or you underperformed, or you called in sick to your personal trainer. Is that fun? Like, evaluate what's fun, and then really look broadly. What else actually creates fun in your life that has nothing to do with alcohol? And you'll find loads of things that genuinely sparks joy and fun. So you just start to obliterate that story, which is fundamentally untrue. There are many ways in your life to have fun. Alcohol just appears to be one of them, but on closer inspection, very often you'll find, oh, actually, it's not the thing that I thought it was and doesn't produce the fun anyway.
Why do you think, despite what you just said, which is a very real explanation of what alcohol does, why do you think people are still convinced that the right thing to do is to regularly socially drink?
I think we've got to a stage where it's become difficult because it's so ingrained in our world, right? So our social clues tell us to drink, right? Because all our friends do. Probably the people that we admire in our life do. Maybe our parents do. So it makes it much harder, I think, when you've got all of those societal clues pushing you in one direction, because unfortunately that's the world that we live in. But equally, these conversations, I think, start to change the narrative and give people insight. What I'm constantly trying to do is just tap people on the shoulder and go, look, just have a little think about this thing. Maybe I'm right. This ginger bloke that's been banging on this podcast about all these benefits, maybe there's something in that for you, the people listening, and therefore to give that a go. And what will happen is people start to become more aware. Where there was a lack of awareness, there's an awareness. And all of a sudden you might start to notice, actually, this isn't as much fun as I thought it was. In fact, what I really like doing is mountain biking. But I know that's going to be destroyed the next day now because I've had a few drinks. But was that fun in the moment? So I think there's a slow awakening. I think alcohol-free alternatives have changed the game completely in the last 4 or 5 years, which have been brilliant, because now there's a real opportunity, especially in that social space, to feel grown up, like you've got a grown up drink that is, alcohol free, that tastes the same, that looks the same, that cuts down a lot of the social pressure and the noise. So I think, well, I know culture is changing quite rapidly, which for me is the most thrilling part of this whole adventure. I spent, I'm at this over a decade. First 5 years I was in the wilderness. No one understood a word I was banging on about. They were like, what do you mean you want to proactively stop drinking to boost performance? Are you mad? You must have a problem. You must be one of those alcoholic kind of lads. How much was your drink? Oh, that's all people wanted to know. And they couldn't get it. Whereas now people have figured it out. Actually, optimal performance for me is about being alcohol free. So this new wave that's come through and these alcohol free alternatives, I think is changing culture before our eyes, which is incredibly exciting.
What's your message to like kids who are like in their early 20s, where it's like prime party age for kids here, at least in the US? I mean, they go off to college, they join a fraternity or sorority or whatever the example is, and they just go off and they just party like nonstop. And some of them will be able to quit and then go on to lead successful lives. Others will be in the camp like you've described, that they'll just drink for the rest of their lives and maybe not have any like quote unquote severe negative health outcomes. And there'll be others that become addicts, right? Like, what's your message to kids that are immersed in this massive drinking culture?
Yeah, and to take that all the way to its conclusion, there'll be lots of those that die, in truth. Over 3 million people a year die from alcohol-related issues. I mean, that in itself is completely nuts, isn't it, when you think about it? It's tough. I think being a young person, and we've both been there at one point, but I think culturally it is changing. So there is a real shift amongst younger people. There's a lot more younger people not drinking now than when we were young, put it that way. Alcohol-free alternatives are changing everything. People are starting to see new role models coming through in their generations that don't drink. They're hearing a completely different story. So whilst it's difficult, I always think about it as like optimal performance. Even as a young person, a young entrepreneur or someone that wants to get on in business and all these type of things, or ace it in their exams, how much better could you be How much are you leaving on the table potentially because of your relationship with alcohol? Because it's destroying your sleep, if nothing else. How much better could you be? You will never know, again, unless you have a little look and try and find out. And imagine having a superpower in amongst all of your peers that are boozing it up and smashing it up and waking up the next day and underperforming. And imagine having a superpower in amongst that world where you're energized and optimized and you're training the skill to go out and have fun and meet new people and connect and do all the things you do when you're young, and then still show up and crush it every day. I mean, that in itself must be worth a little experiment, if nothing else.
For sure. One of the other challenges I think people have with not drinking is dating. Like a lot of times, like a common first date is, oh, let's just go out and grab a drink. Let's go out for some wine or whatever. What advice do you have for someone who's dating but doesn't want to drink?
Yeah, I always get asked this question. Firstly, I have no experience of it because I did all my dating whilst drinking. So I'm going to hold my hands firmly up. But equally, isn't it interesting? Let's just take a back step and look in again. It's interesting that like dating, connecting with someone in a romantic fashion has been so overtaken by alcohol that we are living in a society where we can't imagine going on a date and not drinking. That is totally nuts, isn't it? If you just like sidestep that for a minute and look back in and go, what? How did that happen? We can't imagine it. So I think that's a good reflection first and foremost, but then broaden that a little bit and just think about it in a different way. Everyone's doing that, right? Everyone just goes out and has a few drinks. What about doing something different? Like with someone. Let's not do the boring thing, the overdone thing, the easy, lazy thing. Let's just go for a few drinks. You know what I mean? Like bore off, done that a bazillion times. Why not do something different? Go to the skating rink. I don't know. Go surfing. Meet them at a yoga venue. Like go to like, an alcohol-free rave. I mean, all these things exist. Or do it just alcohol-free. Like make the effort to do something different. I'm sure the person that you're with would appreciate that. You'll have much better connection. And then, as the day progresses, night progresses, you'll figure out if you actually like each other or not. And then maybe that leads to something really special. Like, how many times has the person of your dreams walked past you and you missed them because you were intoxicated? How many times? Could have happened to you 1,000 times. You just don't know. So, for me, having that like clear-headed approach to dating and connecting with other people, that's got to be the way to do it, right? Show up authentically as you. Anyway, it's easier said than done. And I own the fact that I'm not in that situation now, but that would definitely be my mindset if I was.
What do you tell people that want to make the most of their alcohol-free experience? We've talked about the importance of community. We've talked about health and fitness. Anything else that you would share with somebody that really wants to do this the right way, make the most of it, and make sure that they're in this for the long haul?
I think as well, double back to motivating others. Gandhi said it, didn't he? Be the change you want to see in the world. Parents, right? Be great role models. Why not show your children a different approach and a way to show up and shine in life without drinking alcohol? To those with friends or family members that are maybe drinking a bit too much, you don't preach or tell them what to do. The best thing is to show up and shine that message. So I think another important motivational tool is the fact that your courage to show up and do something different will influence the people that you love and the people that they love and the people that they love. So for me, that's a big motivator. I don't do it for that reason, but it was an initial motivator to do something a bit different for my kids. And my wife drinks. My wife still drinks. All my best mates still drink, although they flirt with alcohol free at times. But now my two daughters growing up, 16 and 18, have had one parent that drinks and one parent that doesn't. So then they're in that lovely space, right? I'm like, let them choose. They're not going to get any pressure from me either way, but they've seen something different in their life that I didn't see and that my wife didn't see and most people didn't see because most parents have always been drinking. So for that alone, I think there's some powerful motivation in, just showing up and shining a different message.
And how important do you think modeling behavior is for parents?
Very important. I mean, I think it's the classic, we forget parents are humans as well, I think, but we sort of forget this, don't we? We think that our children don't pick up on these things. They pick up on everything, from our mood to, again, if we're hungover, if we're a bit intoxicated, they're feeling and sensing all of that, right? We're not getting away with it. But also I think it's about being congruent, isn't it? I mean, how many parents, for example, are on their phones telling their children to get off their phones? I'd say that just happens all the time, right? And again, it's a bit like that around alcohol, isn't it? It's a bit like if you're sitting there quaffing a large glass of vino calapso and then trying to tell the kids what they should or shouldn't be doing in their behavior, it's just incongruent, isn't it? Not that we have to be perfect, far from it, but you get the point that I'm making. I think that our kids look to us all the time. They're constantly, and we probably don't realize how much they're picking up on our behavior, our temperament, our mood. Therefore, why not show them something really powerful and different?
Last question I have. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen overall with people giving up alcohol? Like, where do they normally find themselves in a setback?
Yeah, I think it's the social aspect, but there's many. It could be boredom, could be loneliness, could be unhappiness, anxiety. Gabor Mate talks about this, not why the problem, why the pain. And I think there's some truth in that. Even though I'm aimed at the middle lane, there's usually a reason for people drinking. And that might be, again, that, as light as just the social pressure, or it might be just unhappy, unfulfilled. But equally, for me, what actually continues to spiral those feelings is the very thing that appears to take it away. I think that's one of the greatest, tricks of alcohol. Almost everything it pretends to give you, it takes away. So, for example, when it might, for some people, appear to relieve boredom because it just shuts their brain down and that boredom disappears, when they wake up the next day, anxious, tired, low in energy, that just feeds more boredom. And the only way to try and fix the boredom is to have a drink. It's the same with relaxation and anxiety. It's the thing that gives us the anxiety that we feel we need to drink from, to escape from. Very often in our relationships, it might be the thing that masks an unhappy marriage or relationship. But again, that's just proliferating the same unhappiness. Whereas if you were to remove it, at least you get a glimpse to see what's really underneath. And maybe there's proactive steps you can take, such as guidance or counseling. So for me, almost every single reason that trips someone up, invariably, the positive side is to remove alcohol and then have a look at it without it.
Anything else you'd like to add that you think the audience would find value in when it comes to an alcohol-free lifestyle?
No, only that, I'm a bit biased with this one, that I think a lot of people, when they come to this and take a break, are inspired to give back. I think that's an important part of it. I think we want to feel like we matter. We want to feel like we contribute. You're doing a beautiful job of this right now with the podcast. And for me, that vehicle was coaching. Again, it wasn't by, skillful judgment. It was more by fluke of trying to figure out my own brain. But I feel very blessed and grateful that I get to coach and create coaching businesses. I train coaches. And the reason I train coaches is because I found so many people were coming through the alcohol-free space out the other side thinking, I want to give back. I want to add value. I want to feel like I matter. So I think whatever it is you're trying to achieve or choose, connecting with something that feels meaningful and purposeful to you is incredibly important, because I think we're all seeking for, as Archimedes said, that lever and a place to stand so we can move the world a little bit. So I think contribution is really important. Volunteering, giving back in service of others, I think is a really important, again, longer term tool to stay on these optimized adventures.
Well, Andy, this has been amazing. Such an important conversation. I really want to thank you for your time. I know you're busy. You're heading to New York, like last minute here soon. If people want to learn more about you, your journey, and what you're doing with the alcohol-free movement, where can they do that?
If they go to my website, it's the best place to go, andyramage.com. There's lots of free resources on there. If you want to take a break from alcohol, if you want to come and train with me as a coach, that's the best place to go. Or Instagram at Andy Ramage Official on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. I think the audience is going to get a ton of value out of this. And thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Great work, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.